Hey folks, so today we have a TEAC X-1000R auto reverse reel-to-reel tape deck, and this one is in truly spectacular condition. It's an easy near mint. I would probably call it mint if there just wasn't this quarter-inch scratch right at the edge here. It's really hard to find anything else. Serial number is 550-470, so it's one of the last ones made. And the finish on it is just amazing. So it's the black finish, anodized aluminum, brushed horizontally, and just catches the light beautifully. So this one is really at the peak in every way. So from the look and feel, function, as well as the audio performance, and it's been restored by me to really be optimized in all those areas. So just a few things around the TEAC X-1000R. So it's an auto reverse deck, and it does everything in both directions. So it can play back as well as record in both directions, and it has a total of 6 heads total of 6 heads, 3 heads for each direction: erase, record, and playback. So once you put your tape on, you never have to flip it over. Which is super convenient. Next thing I really like about these is the tape transport. So it's super smooth. Let's just do a fast forward. That's actually search to cue. We'll get into that in a minute. But tape transport is super smooth. So in play, in reverse, in fast forward, rewind. It has servo control of the tension, which means that the tension is set and maintained, and that's been calibrated on this deck. That ensures you get not only the best playback, but that your tape heads will last a nice long time. Probably saw that it has electromagnetic brakes, so when it approaches the stop point, it slows down. We'll get into that in a second here. Third thing is the computer control. So you have the option of setting 2 memory positions. One is your 0 position, the other is your cue position. So 0 position is the 0 point on the display, and the cue can be set anywhere. When you press search to 0, which I did now, it'll go to 0 point. I pressed play, so when it gets to that point, it will go ahead and play. In this case, in the forward direction. So you can see it slows down, and when it reaches the point, it stops, and then goes into play. So, just a note, we're not really set up here to demonstrate the audio performance. It is superb, but you're hearing the audio through my camera microphone. So rest assured, this deck sounds absolutely amazing. And that's really the last point I wanted to make in terms of what I like so much about the TEAC, and that's the audio performance is spectacular. TEAC was one of your best companies. They also had a professional line of reel-to-reel decks back in this time, and you really so the X-1000R is from the 80s, early to mid 80s. It was made for several years, and which is pretty late in the era of reel-to-reel. At that point, CDs were just starting. Cassettes were really at their peak, and reel-to-reel was really more, say, 70s format. So, but what makes that great is that this deck is much newer from the standpoint of the circuitry, both from a design as well as a reliability standpoint. And it also has the computer control, which we talked about a little bit. Several other things it can do. You can repeat a section, and you can, for instance, search to cue, and then play either forward or reverse in that cue point. So the other thing you notice is that the transport forward and reverse is super fast, and all that's been set to spec. So let's go a little bit into the the restoration because it's really quite extensive. It's really great sounding deck. Just a note on tape. So this is a modern tape. This is ATR Magnetics MDS 36. I do all the calibrations, the record calibrations to this tape, and it's excellent quality tape. And I mean, tape is expensive, but it's really no more expensive than, say, finding a good condition Maxell tape, which I have those too, and this will play all of them really nicely, and it will record well. If you have a good condition older tape like a Maxell, it will record really well. When it's set to the bias is set to the ATR MDS 36, it'll also work well on RTM, say 900, 911, or I think it's the LP35. So you know, you can really use as long as your tape is in good condition. So you know, when you get into the older tapes, aside from the Maxell, it really gets a little dicey, and you know, then you're dealing with not only the potential sticky tape, but a lot more dirt and debris. So you know, if you have old tapes, that's great. Enjoy them. But if you're looking at making some new recordings, I'd highly recommend this tape or the RTM tapes. That also, just another note, that will also keep the head wear down to a very minimum. So the new tapes are polished very nicely. They're very smooth. So a bit about the restoration, which is really quite extensive. So the entire head assembly and capstan and head mechanism is removed from the deck, so I can rebuild that on the bench. So it's disassembled, it's cleaned, it's put back together with the correct lubricant. So very smooth performance. Just a note, typical pro service deck that you'll find, they'll have done really three things if you're lucky. One is replace the belt. Second is to, you know, squirt something in there to get your controllers working. And then thirdly, if you're, they may hit the controls with some deoxit. So, you know, where that might be, you know, 45 minutes to an hour and a half worth of effort, my restoration typically takes anywhere from 10 to 14, sometimes 16 hours, depending on if there's any other things to repair. On this one, there really there was a bearing in this right motor, which probably had actually happened early in the life of this deck, which I think it had at that point been set aside. And one of the reasons why I think the head wear and then the resulting frequency response on this is just incredible. So we talked a little bit about the head stack. I also completely removed the front face of the unit, which gives me access to all of these controls to really flush them really well with deoxit. And I do that 3 times. Once, twice, the same day, and then you know, I'll do that kind of late in the day, and then the next morning I'll hit them all again before starting the assembly process. At that point, you know, I've rebuilt all the other elements like the head stack. The other thing is this control panel. So luckily TEAC used nice quality switches. They're usually pretty reliable. But over the years, you know, this panel sits out in the open, just dirt and dust gets in among the switches. And so I actually completely removed this unit and disassemble it. Clean it really well, and then you know, what I like to do, and there's really nothing better than like a mild soap and warm water for cleaning things. Obviously then they need to be disassembled in order to do that. So, you know, my goal is to have, from look and feel as well as function and performance, to be really as close to new as possible. The carbon trimmers, so if there's issues with tension or speed on this deck, it's usually the carbon trimmers, which are located near the top of the deck. So actually under these vents where they're kind of hit with, you know, just the normal flow of heat through the deck makes them dirty. And so I actually replace those with modern equivalents that are sealed cermet type. So much more reliable trimmer. All the transport arms assembled while the deck's apart. All that's addressed, cleaned, relubricated. Then we get into some of the calibrations and adjustments. So the brake torque is checked, and then any adjustments made to get that within spec. This one is well within spec. Tape tension, and this is one of the more critical measurements and calibration. So you absolutely need this meter. While folks feel they can do it without, it's just because they don't have it to know how far they are off. And when you set this to spec, which is 50 grams of tension, it's really quite low. And so you get not only excellent playback at that spec, but you get really low wear. And that's what the design deck is designed for, as well as minimizing the strain on the motors and other components. So absolutely essential, and that's been done with this deck. Let's see, tape tension, forward wind speed, forward and reverse wind speed. So you saw how fast that is. That's set to spec. Turns out works out to about a minute and a half from side to side on a large reel like this. Reel table height is adjusted as needed. Tape path alignment is all checked with a clear tape. Usually that's in good shape. On this deck it was. It's not something that you want to mess with unless you really unless it's off and you need to adjust it, and then you really need to know what you're doing. But on this deck that was absolutely good. And really the reason is because once there's some wear on the heads, and then when you make an adjustment, you can have issues with tape transport in terms of curling at the edges and so forth. So this deck is in wonderful situation from the standpoint of tape path adjustment. Then you do your speed. So to do speed, to calibrate a deck, you need two MRL tapes. One is for speed and checking your wow and flutter. The other one's for your audio calibration. So the speed's been checked. High and low speed's been checked and calibrated here. And then once all that's done, your transport is essentially finished, and you check your wow and flutter. And if the deck's in good shape and you've done a good job, you're going to be within spec. This deck came out to 0.041% forward and 0.038% reverse, so that's well within the spec. Then you get into your audio calibrations, which starts with line. You're calibrating your line level. Then you get into your playback frequency response using the tape that I showed you. When all that's done, then you do your record calibration. We talked about the tape. That's done to a specific tape. And when all was said and done on this deck, overall audio performance within, or plus minus 1.2 dB decibels, which is well within the spec of plus minus 3 dB. And a few other things that are done. I do trim the bias for the E position, so some folks do have E tapes. I don't recommend buying E tapes. They're really too expensive. A modern tape is going to outperform it. So anyway, if you have them, that's great. And this has been calibrated for the playback and record in E position as well. And then finally, the DBX is calibrated for its encode and decode level. So if you have the tapes that you've recorded previously with DBX, or you'd like to use that, that's good too. Well within spec on that too. The spec on that is actually twice as wide. It's plus minus 6 dB, but this actually falls well within the normal spec of plus minus 3 dB in DBX mode. So you usually suffer a little bit on frequency response, but this deck is in such nice shape that and such nice calibration that you're really not giving much at all. So I know we saw some of the features. Let's see if we can just do a demo of. Let's try to think what to do. Let's do a demo of the record. So just to hit some of the main features, you got your reel size, and the reel size really has no impact on tension, because remember the tension is computer controlled with the servo. So the tension is or rather the reel switch, what that does between small and large is you saw how the tape slowed down as it approached its 0 point or the Q point. And with a large reel, it'll slow down sooner so that the inertia of, the weight of the reel doesn't, you don't overshoot that mark. So for a small reel, it'll slow down, less soon, or, closer to the mark. That's really all that one does. Speed, high and low speed, so you got 7.5 or 3 7/8. Auto reverse, you can either play forward to reverse, or basically, back and forth, infinite loop. Forward to reverse, you put is like a little piece of magnetic, not magnetic, but conductive foil, aluminum foil that you put on, apply to the tape, and it trips, makes contact, it trips the sensor for forward to reverse. That's how you go forward to reverse. Going from reverse back to forward, it uses the 0 position on the meter. You do have pitch control. Pushed in is just, pushed in is just set to the calibrated speed. Pulled out, then you can vary up or down. This one you can do quite well. Let's see, let me grab my sheet here. I don't know if I made a note of it. But typically you get, I didn't make a note on this one, but typically you can get plus minus 10% on the speed. So pretty wide variation of speed. You can almost do, you definitely do a semitone on your speed variation. Not something most people would use that often. Talked a little about a repeat, so you repeat a section, which is kind of neat. You could set your, it essentially uses your 2 memory positions, your 0 position and your Q position, and it'll just keep, it'll play, rewind, it'll just do that forever. Yeah, let's get into the record. So you do have a record mode switch rather. That's really just a safety so you don't accidentally record. When you do that, then your record indicator here will blink, and then what you do, we need to go to search to 0, so let's get it to 0 position so we can start our recording. As that's going, what we're going to do is I'm going to press record and pause at the same time. And that's how it's kind of just another safety feature. That's very common with tape decks. If you have a cassette deck or another type of deck, to need to press both of those at the same time. You could press record and play and go right into play, but record and pause basically arms the deck. And you'll know if you've done it right because your record will be solid red. Your pause also will be red. With that, let's see, I have a source queued up. This is, that's what I'll be recording. Let me just go back to the beginning with that. Let's leave it in the tape position. We'll get into that a little bit later. So then you press play and then engage your source. Now, because it has 3 heads in both directions, you can monitor your recording in real time, and we're actually listening to the recording right now. So if you go between tape and source, now we're listening to the source. So and now we're listening back to the recording. So you can't necessarily tell through my camera microphone, but the audio performance is really spectacular with this unit. So that's probably enough. Let's just search to 0 and then play, and then we'll actually be, we'll be hearing the recording now that we made. And one nice thing, especially at the higher speed, is your let's pause it or stop. At the higher speed, the noise floor is so low on this that I really don't find it necessary to use DBX. Now with DBX, you won't hear anything. I don't really hear anything through my speakers. If I were to use headphones, I might hear just the slightest hiss. Then with DBX, that will go away. But let's look at one other thing. Let's go from reverse back to forward. So we talked about how it uses the zero position on the decks. So I checked our modes here, and we're in the auto reverse, essentially infinite loop position, which means it will repeat from forward, or rather switch from forward to reverse and then reverse to forward. So let's go ahead and hit play in reverse direction. And so it uses that zero position on the tape to switch back to forward. So that's really it. I know we spent a good bit of time with this one, but it's a great deck, a lot of features, and this is really a pretty spectacular example. You know, all the calibration's been done as mentioned, which is quite a bit of effort, but definitely well worth it. We talked about the 6 heads, 3 forward, 3 reverse. So your calibrations need to be done forward, reverse, high speed and low speed. You got playback calibrations, you got record calibrations, and then you have your different tape positions. Then you also have DPX. So quite a bit involved in calibration, and that's why it's rarely done or fully done with these units. And I enjoy it. I especially love the result, and hope you'll appreciate that as well. So thanks very much, and have a great day.